Okay, I've had a bright idea. Got to do some fret work, and I'm usually trusting in the abilities, leveling abilities of these manufacturers in China, and I've learned on the last two necks that that just isn't the case, and it does actually take a little extra work. And if you want a really nice guitar neck, it's not enough just to recrown the frets after they appear to have been leveled, particularly on a rosewood neck I got recently. Because I got one, the first one I ever got was a thick finish, like a urethane finish on maple fingerboard, like full maple neck, one piece. And that one was pretty good. I did a tiny bit of polishing to smooth the frets, but it really plays nicely, and I've been quite happy with it. Although that didn't come from China, that was a Mighty Mite, so it actually did go through the hands of an American company. There's a bit of perhaps different quality controls, who knows. The next one was just straight off the boat from China, and the fretwork wasn't very good, and then this next one, the rosewood one, is just terrible. So I got a couple frets lifting, and one super high fret. The nut was cut wrong. Boy, it was awful. So anyway, what I've thought of is building my own fret leveling tool, because particularly if you make it out of cheap enough materials, they're literally disposable. So this is scrap left over from my Telecaster routing, you might recognize, and this would have been around the upper bout. So this is where the strap peg goes, like near here. So anyway, there you go. I sand this flat by holding it against this, which is my table saw. So the table saw gives me a perfectly flat surface to work with, and then I just have a chunk of this old grit 60 belt, 60 grit belt. So I push that thing around in circles and back and forth until we got a perfectly smooth underside, and then I'm just going to glue some sandpaper to it. So I can either go with the 1000 or the 1500, depends on how coarse a job I want to do. And in the case of experiment, I don't want it to take too long, and I don't want to have to push because this is pine, so it would dent, and once it has dents in it, it becomes useless for fret leveling. So I'm going to glue this either with just regular white glue or a glue stick, which is what I use to glue the template down onto the Telecaster body blank. So I'm going to get this thing snapped together, and we'll see how good a job it does. Barring air bubbles under the glue, I certainly hope there aren't any of those, this will hold nicely. And I didn't mention I cut the thing off about 8.5 inches long so that it fits nicely with a standard piece of sandpaper. I could have obviously made a longer one, but 11 inches is basically the longest I could have gone, and I tend to take squares off. Well, anyway, I didn't have any pieces that are 11 inches long that I want to sacrifice to this experiment. So when I have this done, I'll just cut that off with an X-Acto knife. I did use a glue stick after all. Just I don't know, convenience. The white glue's a lot messier. So let's let this thing set up, and I should have an absolutely perfectly smooth 1000 grit working surface for leveling my frets. Ready to do some fret leveling here. I have a neck that needs it. There's my handy dandy homemade 1000 grit fret leveler, and this is the mini Strat neck. I've loosened the strings off so I can capo it up at the top here, which fully exposes the fretboard, and I'm going to separate it here at the neck because that's easier than undoing the bridge. It's harder to get that lined up and screwed back in, whereas this is easy to line up. So we're going to get this thing split in half and show you the first step of fret leveling. Fretwork starts with a black marker. Obviously the neck has to be off. Can I see that one? Touch the fretboard with the marker. No, you can't. Oh, well, that's handy. I hit it up here as well. Where'd it go? There. You can see that one. So it's a good thing to start with. If you're going to practice this on anything, practice on something you don't care about. I don't care about this neck. So good learning thing. If you do this a lot, your marker is going to develop a groove in the felt tip, which is going to avoid accidentally slipping off the fret as you're drawing across it. So I don't have that, but we are going to hit this with the sandpaper. Just switch hands. So here's my file or sanding block, and oh, I should have checked if this neck was straight. We got to do that. Do I have a rig for that or not? I gotta find something, and then we'll check for neck straightness. It's probably fine, but I've kind of covered up the hole there, so if it isn't fine, I may be in some trouble. We'll see. Okay, my level tells me that we are not perfectly straight. It's got a bit of relief in the neck, so I have to tighten the truss rod to straighten it, which means I got to deal with the fact that the strings are covering the thing. Oh well, that wasn't really a necessary feature of this experiment. However, what I'm not checking is that the tips of the frets are level, although that's one way to do it. What I want to know is the wood level, the neck wood straight. And a good way of doing that is having a ruler or something that has notches in it where the frets are. Now I have very little use for this scale length, so I don't want to go out and buy, if they exist, a tool that would have the notches in it cut for this scale length. But I could just make one with a piece of wood that I know is straight and sufficiently long for this task, and just mark out and cut grooves in it so that I can touch the thing directly down to the wood. I already know that I just need to straighten the neck out a bit with the truss rod, but as an interesting additional experiment, I could make a little tool for this. We'll see if I can find a nice piece of wood for that. Found a nice straight piece of wood that happened to be the exact length I needed. So using the marker, I marked all the lines off, but I had to clamp it to make sure that it wasn't going to move. So I clamped it to the ruler, the level rather, which is in turn clamped to the neck. It just needs to be still enough that it doesn't really move, and the solution also has to be simple and quickly achieved to pass my personal tests. So now I can either hit these with a file, or I can fire up my table saw and then just move the thing along and zap it with the saw. It's probably faster. A lot noisier, of course, but yeah, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I think we can handle it. Sorry about the lighting, but I can see. Anyway, the solution, as I like to say, always has to be economical. And I usually mean that the cost of the solution needs to justify the value of the end result. So you could spend a lot of money to achieve something that wasn't really worth doing in the first place. And this is worth doing, but a brand new neck is $100, and so are some of these tools. So anything you can make, you know, depending on, if I did this all the time, maybe it would be worth it, but I'm sure I won't. So here's my solution. Got my piece of wood with all my marks on it, table saw, have the blade up nice and high so I can hold the thing flat and make a straight line, and I put this piece of tape here because the guidelines or scribes on this table surface are pretty much worn out. I don't know if you can see these. Those are over in an area where I don't really work a lot, but this area is where you work a lot, and yeah, they're basically gone. So I don't have any reliable markings for where I'm going to cut. So for the short term, this piece of tape will do perfectly so that I can get my cuts exactly where I need them, and Bob's your uncle. So I'll have this thing done in a sec. We'll straighten the neck out and use this to show that the neck is straight, and when I move on to the next guitar, I'm going to make another one of these because I like this setup. This is a good solution.